not Cripple Creek, but Colorado Springs. They had a review and they were giving somebody, and I had just arrived there coming from the infantry, and when we marched out there and we were formed, I was in the rank way in the back somewhere, but it was here our squadron, and then there was another one, and in between was a color guard. See? And while I'm standing there, I see the color guy, one of the color guards with the rifle, he collapsed. And for an instant, nobody did anything. And me only, at that time I was only a corporal. I took and broke ranks, and I walked right over there and came to attention and shoved them aside and waited. That's the biggest kick I had. I had a big kick there, and I wasn't. Nobody blamed me for it.
Well, let's. Okay. All right. In the interview of Mr. Matthew C.
Kawczynski
on 21 February 2001 at his residence in Cheektowaga, New York. Interviewer is Lieutenant Colonel Robert von Hassel. Videographer is Mr. Michael Akey. Matt, tell me about where and when you were born.
Well, I can't use a joke, so.
Sure you can if you want to.
Let's see, I was born in Buffalo, of course, and in Broadway, on Broadway, and next to the School 44.
And when was this?
In 1910, December 2nd, 1910. In time for the appearance of the, what do you call, boys going to World War I.
You remember anything about that?
Of course.
Tell me about it.
Well, at that time I was in about the 8th grade. And I remember the Polish enlistees that enlisted to go to fight the Germans. They had their great gray uniforms with the square caps. And one of them was a son of my grandfather, you know. And he came to say goodbye, and I saw him march away. And also, during the war, which was something that they didn't do this time that I know of, is that they had a military parade down Main Street, Buffalo, New York. They had a tremendous large flag that stretched from curb to curb, and that's crosswise. And the people were holding it up, you know, and they were throwing coins into it for the war effort. Then, of course, just like this war here, why they collected stuff, and I remember going to the firehouse, giving him newspapers, and the firemen would cut it in strips, and they would wax it and make candles out of it for the troops overseas, you know, in the trenches. So that would be World War I.
Do you remember anything about any of the troops from Buffalo, the 74th or the 65th Infantry, when they went away?
No, I can't say I do, really, truthfully. Though my uncle was drafted, of course, 2 of them. The one uncle became a staff sergeant, and he was down at Fort Dix, but he was a cook. In other words, in charge of the cook's kitchen. And the other one, again, wasn't drafted until the war ended. He was drafted, put on a train, left Niagara Falls, and down to Camp Dix, and when he got there, they told him to go home because it was over. So there was 2 of them there at the time.
But you do remember the Polish volunteers?
Oh, I remember them leaving, and the one came to my house. And a strange thing happened, because at that time Like I say, I was about 8 years old. And we didn't have central heating. Everybody had the stoves, and in the dining room we had the stoves with the isinglass around it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was chasing my sister around, playing tag or whatever, around the stove, and she happened to put her hands on the stove and burned her hand. And I didn't know what to do, being at that age. And my father wore derbies. There was a style at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And we put water in the derbies, and she had her hand in there. And this soldier came to say goodbye. Of course, my folks weren't there. My mother had gone to the market. So that's an incident that was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And that was there. But like I say, personally, I didn't. Well, naturally, the troops marched down Main Street, and my father took me down there, but we'd take the streetcar.
Mm-hmm.
And
did you remember anything about the troops marching down Main Street?
yes, at the time they had, like I told you, the flag.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had that little flag that was so wide and long, and people were throwing coins into it. I don't know how it should have weighed it down.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we stood in front of Woolworth's 5 and 10 cent store. And not much more.
Now, what did you do when you got out of high school?
Well, the reason I got out of high school was the fact that my father, he was applying for a pension for his war in, when he was in the Spanish-American War, which he never asked for until he was ailing. And it took a little while to establish, because he went into he had signed up. At that time, you didn't have to have a birth certificate to get into service.
Mm-hmm.
He went under the name of Kohl, K-O-H-L, and he served that. So he had to take and verify people that was there. And while he was in the service, one time the captain had given an order, abandoned ship, and he was a stoker with the shovels, you know, stoking the furnaces, and he had just come up on deck and to cool off. And when he got the order, well, he grabbed the whole of a life preserver, and at that time they had the old cork life preservers. So he jumped overboard because that was the order. But the trouble is, he didn't put it on properly, so when he dove in the water, why, his head was down, and the preserver was tangled around his feet, and he didn't know how to swim. But that's all he remembered. And there was a fellow from Boston that pulled him out of the water. So it took him all those years to take and find out the whereabouts of this here fellow that pulled him out of the water to verify his name.
Mm-hmm.
So then don't forget that the Depression started about that time. And he was ailing and no jobs. So he got the magnificent sum of $25 a month pension.
And you left school to help out with?
And then, so I decided that I only went 2 years in high school.
Mm-hmm.
Maston Park High School, by the way. And so I got a job delivering drugstore. And I stayed there a year until I left there. And I was without work, and my father had something to do with the police. He belonged to a private agency, police agency,
Mm-hmm.
Investigating divorces and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
And he again was they saved 2 farmers from that the governor had to take and hold up the execution. Twice they had their heads shaved to be executed, and each time the governor commuted it. And he, being a detective, he was sent to Sing Sing. He spent 8 months in Sing Sing, but he was put in a certain cell that they thought that the people were the ones that killed these other farmers. Well, he was finally released from Sing Sing, naturally, because it was all set up. And he went with this one gentleman on robberies, and until finally that fella told him that, bragged about it, that they took and killed this so-and-so. So today, why, those two men owed their lives for him. But the man that they worked for, his name was O'Grady. He was Irish. And just by happenstance, after putting in 2 years trying to solve that thing, they had to sue the government in New York State. But O'Grady died at that time, and his wife never pursued it, so my father's 2 years of work went for naught. Well, they did odd jobs on the side.
So now, you were delivering for a grocery, drugstore?
When I worked for Tui's drugstore on Main and Virginia.
And then what did you do?
Well, I left that job, and my father asked me if I want to, he'll give me a job, because he knew the hotels and police and all that. So he took me down to a hotel. Well, at first he asked me if I wanted to be, the way he put it, he says, I said, what kind of work is it? Well, he says, it's a busboy. And I said, well, as long as it's around buses, because I was mechanically inclined and all that, and I was already taking pictures. So I went there, and they look, and busboy, you got to carry dishes.
Mm-hmm.
So the first year I was there, this was in '76. And when was the Depression? 79, right?
1929.
I got my dates, 29. Well, I started at Hotel Statler in 27. So the first year that I was there, well, naturally I couldn't very well quit, because my father got me the job, and we needed it because then he was ailing quite badly. And so I stayed there that first year, and then the Depression came. Then everybody was stuck. We worked 3 days a week, half days, and got paid $12 a week. And my mother, again, got his pension. They gave her $25 a month. And there were days that, well, I ate at Hotel Statler. You know, they had their kitchen there and that. But we lived in Ivanhoe, which is right at the city line. And I had to walk down to Delvin, from Delvin all the way to Genesee Street to take the streetcar to go uptown. And that's quite a hike. And this is winter and summer, until I finally got a car. But then he eventually became a waiter. First we waited on the dining rooms and that. I didn't like the job, never did. And put me in the room service. And in the room service, I naturally ran into celebrities. I was there when Lindbergh came, but I wasn't in the room service at that time. And also, I waited on Major Doolittle.
Mm-hmm.
Mind you, Major Doolittle. He was a major at that time. And we talked, because I was already playing around the airport. And that was one. And then Amelia Earhart was there with her husband, Putnam. I waited on them. And I asked her if she knew what the weather was. She said, no, she didn't. So I rang the Buffalo Airport and gave her the weather. And
you had already started to hang around the airport?
Yes. I was taking pictures and writing home to develop them and all that. Some of it was not so good. But experience counts. At that time, all you had is the administration building and 3 hangars. That's all that was there. In one of the pictures, there's a shot of a gypsy moth, which is Canadian, made in Canada, and also a shot of a Curtis hawk that was called a Curtis hawk.
Mm-hmm.
And also that gypsy moth came from Canada, and what was the name of that general in the German army that was Air Force?
Goering?
No, the one's stunt pilot and all that. He was one of the heads of the thing too. But he flew that plane from Canada, but he also took and went through Curtis Wright. Curtis was building planes already, see?
Mm-hmm.
And they called that Curtis Hawk a dive bomber, see? And that's where he got the idea of the dive bomber Stuttgart.
Mm.
Straight down. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the way I look at it, because he took and advocated it for the German Air Force then. And so in a way, while we copied it, he copied us.
Now, did you continue to work as a waiter until World War II?
That's right. And although I was up on the 8th floor taking care of somebody, and I came down to service elevator, and when I got out of the elevator, somebody told me they bombed Pearl Harbor. And well, it was in the offing already, it was rumors. And I said, what? So that was December 2nd, was it?
7th.
7th. So I took and about 2 weeks after that, I went over to the post office to enlist. But in the meantime, I had my teeth. This was one of my big faults. And I had a plate in already. No, they didn't want me because I had a plate. So I let it ride, and come March, I went down there again, and he said, oh, they're taking people now for dentures or not dentures. So I says, okay. I took 2 weeks off and quit the job and went over there, and they says, okay, they'll take me now. And from there, they took us over to Fort Niagara, and this was something here. I had an advantage of many of the other people going in the service, is because my brother took me hunting and that, deer hunting, and I stayed in the Adirondacks, learned a little bit about woods, mm-hmm. and got lost too, by the way. And so I had an advantage. I already knew how to live out there, and I wasn't a real city sneaker. How'd they call it? Slicker. So, but that day at Fort Niagara, they took us up in the barracks. Those were the old barracks. They tore them down, but they were the Civil War barracks. They were long, elongated things, and there was a huge attic. So there we are. There were about 200 men there, and he says, "Gentlemen," he says, "Are you ready to swear in?" And he said, "Raise your hand." And they all raised their hand, and we all did. And now repeat after me. And then when he got it, he says, the sergeant says, "Now, God damn it, throw those cigarettes away. You're in the Army now." Ooh. That was my introduction to the Army. Ooh. So we got on a train and drove all the way down to Camp Dix. No, excuse me, Columbia. What's the name again? Columbia.
Columbia?
Yeah.
Jackson.
Fort Jackson. And I have a picture of myself there in the first day and first few days that we were in. And they shoved me to a combat engineer outfit. Mm-hmm. And so that took care of my Air Force. But even then, the very first morning that we fell out for roll call, it's the dark, because this was in January or something like that. And he starts going down the alphabet, calling roll call, and when he gets to KK, and he used that four-letter word, "Whose name is that?" And me, people are so scared when they're first, sergeants, when they first go in. I'm way back there, and I holler out to them, "My name is Kawczynski. If you can't pronounce it, call me Matt." Right away, I let them know who's who.
How did that go over?
Well, at the time, not so good. But there came another time when there was a Polish fellow, and he called him a Polak. And I said, he came to me and he tried to call me that. And I told him, I said, "Only my friends can call me a Polak." And that took care of that. He never did after that. And there was a few occasions, like the officers there were architects, you know, engineers.
Mm-hmm.
And two of them were a German or what, I forget what, but they had a terrific accent. So he's giving a lecture on map reading. Twice I corrected him on it, you know. Add west and subtract east, you know, on maps. And after the thing was over, the sergeant came over and he says, "Are you right?" I said, "Yeah, sure." He says, "How do you know?" "Because I took up aviation." I says, "I had to take and map my own routes." And that was one occasion. Another time for inspection, the same officer came in and he takes an inspection and he announces, "Now, gentlemen," he said, "you got 2 pairs of shoes. Wear them at the same time." Those are his exact words. In other words, the one pair you wear and the one pair you have underneath the bed. On occasions, and then come a retreat, why the CO learned that I knew photography. He had a camera, 8mm, and he wanted pictures. So here we are, the whole 107 is lined up for a retreat, and it's on a hill, like. And so I'm out there, way out, taking a picture of them, the whole thing, because he wanted a picture of the retreat. Mm-hmm. And I came back and I gave it back, gave him the camera, and then I went to chow, and the adjutant comes running in, "Who's out there taking pictures?" And the CO just happened to come into mess hall, and he said, "Sir," he says, he was with me. I gave him orders. So a couple times he had me take pictures. But I finally found out how to get out of the outfit. Being an enlisted man, in July of that year, there were orders that up to July if you enlisted, you had preference of service. Mm-hmm. So I immediately, by that time I was riding a motorcycle because that's the job they gave me. And I knew the headquarters and all that, so naturally at battalion headquarters I went over there and I told them to put that in. See, I put in the transfer. But that was already about a month after I put it in when I took them. And that's as far as it went, see. And I came home on a furlough, and my brother took me over. I told him what the score was, that it's not moving. So I went my brother took me to a lawyer in Ellicott Square building, was a retired Army man. Of course, he was older, he wasn't in the service. So he says, I'll tell you where your transfer is. He says, it's in the sergeant major of the whole outfit. And he says, he's got it there and it's collecting dust. So that was that. I came home, came back and we were packed up and we went for maneuvers down in Mississippi. And from Mississippi, when the maneuvers were over, we went on train by the way, the pictures were in the pictures were on in the Life magazine of that convoy leaving Mississippi going to Arizona. And I took and volunteered watching the 6x6 on the flat car. And I have a picture of that, by the way, the whole thing. And it's, there's one picture there where the train is pulling the whole batch, but the train is coming and I'm going this way because it was going down. It made a big circle. And I got pictures of that. Those pictures I have.
And how did you come to be in the Army Air Corps?
Well, that's what I'm trying to tell you. It's leading to that. So when after I came back from this furlough, about what he told me, you know, how to get out. I right away found out where was the sergeant major of the whole division, see. And he was in the tent. We were all in tents there. And the dust clicks, so I went and told my story, and he says, is your CO holding you back? I said, no, he isn't. And so he says, well, let's see. And he went over, he actually dusted the trunk off. And he says, oh, here's your what he called transfer. He says, come back and see me in a week. Well, I didn't even wait a week. And I came over and he says, yeah, look, see, here's your transfer. You're going to Washington and you'll be in the Air Force. I says, Washington, what am I going to do in Washington? He says, no, not Washington, D.C. He says, state of Washington. He says, in photography. So naturally I pack up and finally get over and I report to the 23rd Photo Squadron there. And there too, when I reported infantry-wise, you know. In other words, I already knew how to conduct myself. See, when I reported, snap to and salute and all that, so forth. And I says, reporting, sir. He says, well, he says, you want to go to school? I can send you to a photo school. I told him, I have enough school, sir. I don't want to be no more. But he said, we're a hot outfit. A hot outfit? I didn't know what he's talking about. He said, no, in about 2 months we're leaving. I said, well, I suppose that's what I was here for. So I had to take and learn some of with the fellows that were around with me. And they have to accept you because they were already together for quite a time, and me, I was a newcomer. But we went to overseas training. We hiked up to about 9,000 feet in the park there, and we had to set up tents. And nobody knew how to set up a pup tent. So I had to show them how to set up pup tents. And then during the night it rained, because they had 4 o'clock every time the day it rained. And no sooner did it rain, everybody's hollering, oh, we're getting wet, we're wet. So I had to show them how to ditch a pup tent. And my mother was sending me the newspapers from here. And I take and made a pack. I put a newspaper in a blanket, a newspaper in a blanket, and I made myself a bedroll. So another thing, and then I stick my feet in the jacket for at night to keep it warm. They copied that too. And then there was a nearby town of Cripple Creek. The officers went down there with some of the list sergeants, and they got in a tussle there or whatnot. So for punishment, every day we had to go make so many miles hiking. And this one particular time we're making the water that feeds Colorado Springs is from a reservoir that's at about 10,000 feet. So we're marching up there 10,000 feet, and he's having us at the regular march, you know. And I told the lieutenant, I said, you don't march, because I was skiing by that time, see, so I knew how to ski. And I told Lieutenant, I said, you don't cover the post like that, because we only marched about 100 yards and everybody fell out. No wind. So he finally gave us orders to every man for himself, and we rushed down out of there. So that was another occasion. So life just went on. We got on a train and we came to Kentix. And from there we got on a boat, and that was the sister ship of the Mauer Castle. Mm-hmm. And it took quite a few thousand men on there. And they put us, let's see, well, the mess hall was in a in a ballroom. And the bunks were stacked up, 10 bunks, one above the other, and I, like a darn fool, was on the bottom. But they were so close and so tight that the man that was above you, he was resting on your nose. And then the worst thing for some of those people was that they never were on board a ship or anything. Mm-hmm. And they all, because they had the mess hall right in there. They put it on a stage in mess hall. And the cooking and whatnot, these guys were getting sick, seasick. And me again, I was used to it already, because I was on the Niagara River here and whatnot, and I didn't get seasick. But we traveled, that again in itself was an experience. Thousands of vessels all around you, as far as you can see. And they're all going that way. But luckily nothing, there was one of the first huge convoy that went by without being attacked. Mm. But we finally passed the Azores, and we were the first convoy to go through the Azore, what's the point there? The stone. The level of Gibraltar.
Right.
Yeah.
Blues of Hercules.
Yeah. We were the first ones to go through there while it was still daylight. It was daylight, dusk. So we went past Algiers and we're going, and all of a sudden the Jerry's come. So everybody down to the deck where they were supposed to be. We were down 5 decks. And the officers are standing there by the ladder with their pistols and saying, anybody makes a break for the stairs gets it. And all of a sudden we hear a boom, 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 this whole ship is shaking. Mm-hmm. And we swear that they were dropping bombs around us. Well, they were. But Germans being German, like orders are orders, they flew over the whole convoy and they went and attacked Algiers. And then on the way back, then what they had, they were dropping. And I myself swore that they were dropping and it was near us because the ship was going like that and it really shook. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't that. I think it was the 5-pounder or the 1-pounder, what they had one gun up there. But we got in, this is going on quite a while.
Yeah, you doing okay?
So we finally pulled into Bizerti, mm-hmm. and Bizerti is a perfect harbor. And we pulled up to the docks, and there was British soldiers waving to us, and like darn fools, we were throwing them the chocolates we had, and the cigarettes. And we finally disembarked, and if anybody saw a movie set, that was it. They pulled us into Bizerti, and all the buildings around there were damaged. And they stopped us. There was a plaza there. Of course, the water wasn't spraying, but it was all covered with the brick. They had bulldozers pushed it on the plaza there, and they had us waiting there. And me again, pulled out my, excuse me, I pulled out my raincoat and made a pillow, and I'm sleeping on the bricks. I said, I'll wait till they're ready to move. Sure enough, they finally told us to fall in, and we started marching along the beach road. And we got a certain distance away from the Bizerti, and then the skipper says, fall in, find yourself a place to sleep. So we did. So the next day, he tells everybody to dig foxholes. Well, me being new in the outfit, and the fellas that were there ahead of me, they got it from supply, and I couldn't get it, see. Mm-hmm. So sure enough, the Jerrys came that night, that first night. And I already had taken a camera along, and so I'm out there. They're in the little woods away from the beach. Mm-hmm. And I go to the beach, to the seashore, and watch them dropping bombs among the ships that were dispersed there, see. And I'm trying to go take pictures. And the skipper was there, the major and the captain. What are you doing here, Corporal? I said, I want to take pictures. He says, get back in there and find yourself a hole, you know. So I went back and in among the woods, the trees. Mm-hmm. And there was a barracks bag standing there because we carried our barracks bags. And this fellow was sitting on that barracks bags, and he got off of it. So I said, a good place to sit. So I sit on the barracks bag. And I no sooner said, did you ever go hunting where people around you shot and all the stuff coming through the leaves? Well, that's what I want to say here, see. I heard that coming around, and all of a sudden I heard a plane dive, that noise that they make when they dive. Mm-hmm. And I got off that barracks bag and I dove into the sand. And the next morning, the fellow hollers, who did this to my barracks bag, the one I was sitting on? A piece of snapper went in about 4 layers of tack. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, before that even happened, an aircraft gun went off right near us, and that scared the heck out of me. You're going to run out of tape here.
Well, we're going to have to take a break for a moment because we are at the end of that.
Yeah, we started. Where were we?
This is tape 2 of the interview with Mr. Matthew Kawczynski.
Yeah, that's good.
On 21 February 2001. Where we were at, you were disembarked in Bizerti.
That's right.
And now you want to tell me how you got to Italy?
No. Well, anyway, Bizerti, we stayed there for 3 months, okay. 2 months, because this was November. And they took over a white sister's house, or, you know, the sisters wore a big white. And the reason for it was they needed a place to have it, make photos, and that's what they used. They had a photo lab there. And some of the solutions and whatnot that they used, the same thing we use. So we used those, and of course I was glad to get the film. Their aerial camera is 75 millimeters wide, no, 70 millimeters wide. And gee, I says, where am I going to get film for my 35 millimeter camera? And so, ingenuity American, you know. I made a little outfit with a razor blade, and I took the 70 millimeter and I dragged it through there, see? And I had 2 50-foot rolls of 35 millimeter. And, while we went through this, can I mention that when the 77th, when I was with the 77th, mm-hmm. in South Carolina, we passed in review for Churchill. And we were in trucks because engineers don't have to march, you know. And so Churchill was to say that we have a long way to travel before we'll be trained. And then when we were in there, I told you in this place where we have set up a photo lab in North Africa, our commander was Elliot Roosevelt, the Roosevelt. And some of the full-time soldiers, you know, they were sort of peeved because he made a trip in a P-38. He rode piggyback behind the pilot, and they took a flight over northern waters there of the North Africa there. And when he came back, why, they gave him a medal, but the pilot didn't get a medal. So the regular Air Force were the guys were not so happy about that. But when the president came to go to Yalta, he had to stop in to see him where we were. So once again, we had to stand formation. Of course, once again, I was in the rear. But anyway, if, something happened there before we went into formation. And from where we were camped, they loaded us on 6x6 when they took the canvas top off and they put all the bows in the front. You've probably seen them. And they're tied up. And me, Eager Beaver, when we were told to get on board, why, I was one of the first, and I'm up against the board. But then 30 or 40 men got behind me, see? And as we were going along, there was a place where the driver had to put his brakes on. I thought I was going to have my ribs really crushed. But he came over to see us, and he was in a Jeep, and Eisenhower was in the Jeep, and his son. And I have pictures of that too, by the way. And also Eisenhower came in the photo lab to interview us, look at the photo lab over, and there's a picture of him speaking to Elliot in the photo lab. And I was introduced, of course, of making aerial shots, or the prints. And the first job I got was making 20 by 24s. Not I making, they gave me the lowliest job, washing them. It's the Army system. Yes, but in a short while, I was printing. And there we had to be careful too, because our film was, you know, it doesn't burn. And inflammable, or how you pronounce it. And the British, again, was celluloid. So anytime you got an order to make some prints on British films, because we kept both films, British and that, and we were combined, of course. And this one occasion of this, one of the men got an order, he got the British roll, and he's smoking cigarettes. So he puts the roll into his machine, and it's exposed, of course. And he takes the cigarette, and because he knows that it's fanfall. So he leaves the cigarette on top of the shelf there. The ash falls and hits that, and boom. So he got a little burnt. But we were there. We had no ammunition or anything. They hadn't issued us any ammunition as yet, until we got ready to go back to Italy. Then they issued, and me again, because I knew already, I had fired all the weapons. I fired the 22, I fired Garand, and I fired what's ours? What is the other one?
Springfield?
Springfield. Yeah, I love that gun. And I fired that. I fired the Tommy gun, and I also fired the submachine gun. And I did pretty well on them. In fact, because of the fact that on my first furlough home was for the people that made expert on the firing range, see. So I made expert, of course, because I already had fired heavy weapons. See, the same thing when it came time to get on a plane. Well, before that, why they took us on convoy to Brazil to wait to get on the ships, which you got pictures of there. LSTs. I took pictures, you know, I was supposed to take them. And anyway, the skipper on this LST that we were on was a British man, sailor, soldier, lay sailor. And he says, is there anybody over here that can fire an automatic weapon? So I had pictures of myself on board this ship with all that water and being 5 decks below on that coming over. I didn't like that idea, so I took and I wanted to fire the weapon. 4 hours on, 4 hours off. So we went all the way across. I have pictures of that too, me on the weapon. And nothing happened to us, luckily, until we landed there in Toronto. And the sergeant lined us up to wait for the train until dark. We were supposed to travel in the dark. And I have pictures of us lined up, and you never saw a motley crew of soldiers. Every second one of us had a different uniform on, or a different part of a uniform. One fellow had an Italian jacket, the other one had a British jacket, that guy had an Irish, another helmet or something like that. But after a while, after we were there for a while, the Italians often said, the Italian soldiers walk by our house and they go cling, clunk, clunk, hobnails, you know. And then came the Germans and they made noise walking by. And the Americans, they come walking by, you can't hear them. They got rubber soles. And he says, they're not soldiers, they're mechanics. But there was another instant where going on that automatic, because I had fired stuff like that, see. But nothing happened, and we got on a train in dark, and we started. And it's an Italian train, and I don't remember if it was electric or not. I think it was electric, because that's all you have there. Anyway, the seats were wooden. The seats were wooden. And it's blackout, and we come by the city of Bury. And as we come by, the train is up higher, up a little higher elevation, and the coastline is below us. And there's another scene, just like a movie scene from the movies. The ships were dispersed in that harbor in Bury, and sure enough, there was an air raid there. And I believe, and we found out later, that the Jerrys did hit that one ship that had mustard gas in it. And there was a number of Italians and let's say a number of people that were gassed. But that wasn't admitted at the time. But the only reason we did take that over is because they had rumors that the Germans were going to use gas. So they wanted to be prepared to retaliate. But anyway, we're going down a train in the dark, blackout. And there was the first case where we had one picture, one kid was on the end of the train, and because the bombs are falling there, you could see him. And he started crying, and he started crying and wailing. And he crawls the whole length of the train to this one fellow that was a scuffle, you know. He was from Arkansas. I say Arkansas because if you said Arkansas, why, he'd jump on you. He was ornery, in other words. He walked up as far as this kid that was standing, sitting there, and he takes this fellow that was weeping like that, and he soothes him. It's a shame, but that was the first incident like that I saw where somebody broke down under fire, you know. But anyway, we got to San Severo, and they billeted us in billets, you know. They took over the houses, and they put us so many here, so many there. And they took a school. They took over a school, an elementary school, and they had the Italians make concrete sinks to set up, and we start working there. We had 2 shifts, one in the morning and one in the evening. Well, up to evening, let's say, 11 o'clock. And we started working. You saw a picture of me, show it to you. And by that time, why, they had made me sergeant, and I was already in charge of a lot of men. And the prints are made by hand, but then they have to be washed. And it takes a long time to wash the prints. But that isn't the worst part of it. When the prints came to the dried, they were all mixed up. And you got orders from London wants this batch, and then you got orders from somebody else that wants this batch. All had to be sorted out. And after it was all sorted out, we could leave the men go on a night shift, and they could go back to their barracks or the places they were staying. But that man that was broke down on a train on a trip to Barry, he took the worst job. And by the way, when they issued guns to us in North Africa, what kind do you think he chose? He took a Tommy gun. I says, you would. They give him all these straps of bullets, you know, that he had to carry and whatnot. But he took that job that when the prints were all done, to take them to a place that would deliver them, see. And I don't know how he did it, but he must have got nerve in a hurry. We also had a man over there that kept on insisting to be sent home, discharged. He had what they call a rapid heart. And he was a worker, boy. He could print like a fool. But he went all the way through. They never did discharge him. But we were there sitting at the time. Of course, I can't tell you about a few things that are unmentionables. Or can I?
You can if you want to.
There's no sooner we got there, not like the Germans, because we found out how the Germans act. The MPs got a hold of certain women that other women said they had venereal disease, and they grabbed them and they took a portion of a building and they made a hospital out of it. And they got those women that were there to snitch on other women that they know they were sick. They took them there until they were satisfied that they were cured, which took a few weeks, you know. Of course, the locals didn't like that at all. But that's the reason I have prostrate trouble. That's the reason all the soldiers have prostrate trouble, because they were without making love for all those years. And if you got that picture of a sat sack on there on the table, did you see it? Well, that's true. We had the washwoman do some of our wash for a piece of soap. And they must have wondered why a lot of those socks were so sticky. But the Germans, again, I know now, because one of the fellows that bowls with me, I don't think you want to interview him. He was in the German army. And he tells me that as soon as they came to a town like that, why, they would get a hold of one that was a fast lady, and she would snitch on other ones, but they would set up a house, and they had a enlisted medic, and then they had one sergeant that his name was Sergeant Hurlmaster. And they would gather all these women and they'd keep them there. And these soldiers, when they wanted relief, they would go over there and they'd, after they did their business, they'd go to an inspection and the doctor would okay them. But we didn't. We took over big hospitals for venereal disease. Big hospitals. And if you had venereal disease, immediately if you were married, they would notify your wife and they would cut your pay off. Well, they would cut her too. And actually, she wouldn't like that. So that was to deter you from picking the ladies up.
Did it work?
I don't know. The hospitals are operated, that's all I know. Me, again, I was just married. I got married in the 77th.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was a good boy, behaved. Not until on a trip home. But that was another instant. That, and we got air raided there once. And while we were working, we had to shut down, get out, and there was a wire fence around this school and railroad tracks. And we had to go under that wire fence, and son of a gun, I gashed my, could have poked my eye out. I gashed it on the barbed wire. And that was a real manufacturing place.
Mm-hmm.
We British and American combined. They were on, we were on the main floor and they were on the upper floor. And the sergeants over there would come down and drink our coffee and converse with us peons, and so to speak. They would talk to the privates and all that. But these sergeants, when they wanted something done, they would call their corporal, have this done or that done. They wouldn't talk to them. They wouldn't give the order. Strict, very strict. Well, that was another occasion in North Africa that I could tell you about. We were out with our BX for quite a while, and nobody had smokes or anything like that. And it was a hot afternoon, and I'm walking on the path, and walking towards me is a British soldier with a hat like they have in Africa, and he had shorts, and he had a red mustache, young man. And he's coming up towards me, and he's smoking a cigar. And when he comes abreast to me, I'm only at that time a corporal. I say, stop. He stops, and I take the cigar out of his mouth, and I take a couple puffs, and I gave it back to him. British soldier, and I'm a corporal. But I just mentioned it now for that. Mm-hmm. That and the fact that we had to destroy all the pictures that were not right. Mm-hmm. And we had a library. We had the biggest library of film there, of anywhere.
Now this was you were working for the 12th Air Force.
Yeah.
And basically the photos you were taking were of, were they gun camera photos or were they reconnaissance photos?
No, they were reconnaissance. That was reconnaissance. The planes they flew were P-38s. And the only arms that they carry was a .45.
Were these bomb damage assessments, or were they for use of the ground troops?
No. What happened there is they'd have soldiers, officers. They were called interpreters. They were trained to look at these results of these. Like one time I looked over the shoulder of one of the men that was an interpreter, and he shows a picture of a SWAT going through woods in Germany. And they're trying to figure out what that was. And me, I already had been skiing here in Buffalo. I said, that's a ski run, can't you see that? And he says, oh yes. So, but see, each one had a different job. Two men had to know where every boxcar, every train was in Italy or Germany, wherever they could reach, see. And there was 2 men at the nowhere, every boat around there, and what it was carrying and all that. I can go a little further on. I'll tell you that the one after the war, I went with one that had to know where a certain train traveled every month to a certain spot. They didn't know why it did. Why did it do that? What was it carrying? Turned out that they didn't have no water lines going out there, and this is where they have a naval yard, see. And the ships, I got pictures of that too. And all that ship did once a month is carry fresh water. See? But everyone had a different job. Another one was to know every bridge, and so on, so that they could tell the general what's going on. We'd get an order all the way from England, from London, pictures taken in Italy, and they want the pictures of it. We had to send it to them. By the way, I had volunteered to go to England that time, and they had an English machine, multi-printing machine, and we had one too. Eastman Kodak made one, but not very good. Anyway, they said they wanted 2 people to fly to London to learn how to operate that English machine. So I wanted to go, but at that time I was still only a corporal. They sent a sergeant. But it was a good thing, because at that time, there was just a time that that actor got shot down off of the coast of Spain. That one actor, he was flying from London, and he got shot down. And if you flew from Italy to London, you'd be going over some hot spots, see. So again, it's my contention to say that being in war is the greatest thing that you can experience. You cannot buy an experience such as that, as long as you can come back whole. If you're not in the wrong spot at the wrong time. That LST that I told you about, we went over there early before Christmas, but then after Christmas they're sending us more troops, more hands to make pictures the same way on LSTs. And they're in the Mediterranean heading for Italy. And like darn fools, the ship in front of them has all the officers on there, and so many high-ranking enlisted men. And then the ship, there was one shipping back, see. And while they were going along, this ship in front of them got hit by an aerial bomb, and by the time the other boat went across it, the wake was quiet. 532 men like that. So when they came to us, why, all it was the officers, and they had no men. So they had to send the officers back to the United States. But you saw like the other one there with 1,000. You see, we had rumors of that. See. So anyway, what they did, they split up our outfit, made us 12th Air Force, and they made the other ones, 15th Air Force. They covered the bombings in Yugoslavia and that. And this friend of mine that bowls with me and that's going with me from the hotel, he flew 50 missions or 35 missions there, and that was tough.
But basically, for the rest of the war in Italy, your duties remained pretty much the same.
Mine, yes. Except that every time I had some time off, we would go reconnaissance. We'd call it reconnaissance. I and another staff sergeant, we'd go out and go to all the hinterlands, not the cities. We'd go up in the mountains like Manfredonia. It's a little town that's on the seacoast. But if you want to climb up to the mountain where the castle was, you got to go like this to go up there. And that castle was built in 1492. Of course, it was ruins when I was there. And we went swimming and all that. So it was interesting, but when it came time, the furloughs, an hour, I'd give the men such and such, and they'd go down the Isle of Capri. Mm-hmm. And me again, because I was in charge then by that time. I didn't take any until the war was over. Then I had to go, these people that were, I told you, interpreters. They had one interpreter who was going to Germany, and the other interpreter was going to Switzerland, and then the third interpreter was going, where was it? North Africa. Now, me again, I had a choice. Oh, so what happens is my commander, my CO, he says, Matt, he says, I'll take that one going to Germany. What can you do? He's a commander. And he says, well, I says, as long as you're going there, bring me a 45. Well, he brought me some pieces. You saw him in the, laying on a bed in that bayonet and shoes and stuff like that. But me again, I said, Switzerland, if I go to Switzerland, all I can do is ski, and this was already in the summertime. I says, no, I saw some in Africa. I wanted to see how they really live. So I got a ride from what do you call, there to Sicily. From Sicily, we landed in Benghazi. And from there, we landed in Cairo, where we almost got killed. And then from there, we went to Palestine. And coming home, we were supposed to go land in Greece. But coming back, they had rebellions just at that time, so we didn't go. We came straight home. But,
you say you almost got killed in Cairo?
Yes.
What happened?
We were coming down there, we landed in Benghazi, and we take the next trip and we go to the airport, I forget the name of the one in Cairo. And when we got there, there were so many planes landing that they were stacked up. I think it was 3 or 4 layers. And we're going around in the line, waiting for a turn to land. Sure enough, some damn fool goes the wrong way, and he's going right at us. Our plane is really heading right for him, and we both peeled off. Could have got held ahead there, see. But it happens. Like one time I did take a trip to Naples because I wanted to take pictures of some bombing runs that they were doing at Naples. This was early in the war. And so I go down to the airport where the planes were, and they asked this one fellow if he's going to Naples. And he was a British man. And he had one of our airplanes, a B-25. And he says, yeah, he says, come on in. And without taking our names, and I'm putting us in manifest or anything, he says, come on in. There's 11 of us piled in that B-25. We're holding on to the railing like straps in a car. And we fly over to Naples. And that's, the airport there is Camp something on the other side of the bay. What could happen there? We were only 15 minutes away from the front line. If that plane was shot off, who would know where 11 men are? Who are they? What were they doing? But British, he didn't care.
So, soon after the end of the war in Europe, you came back to the United States?
Yes. What happened? Oh, something happened there, too.
What was that?
Naturally, they put us on a Liberty ship. And while we were in a Rebel Depot to begin with, we had to wait almost a month and turn our money into U.S. and nothing to do. Even the sergeants took in volunteer staff sergeants and master sergeants volunteered for kitchen police because there was nothing to do. And I had lost my track of mind.
Well, there's something interesting about coming back to the United States.
Oh, yes. So we get on this Liberty ship and we take off, and we didn't eat ice cream for the 2 years that we were there. And we didn't drink milk for that time. When we did have milk, canned milk, why the sergeant would ask us, do you want sugar? Do you want sugar for your coffee, or do you want for your pancakes? But I detract. But anyway, when we finally did get on a board ship, and we start going across, and everybody was shooting dice and whatnot, and start getting rough. And I got sick. I don't know what from. This LST, they broke open the ice box, and they pull out milk, little bottle milks, and boy, it was frozen. And we couldn't wait for the darn thing to really freeze. And I'm drinking that ice cold milk, and I catch a pneumonia. So they put me into a sick bay. And the sick bay consisted of a little cubby hole, 2 here, 2 bunks there, and 2 bunks here. And they put me on the upper bunk on this one. And on the other side of it was some kind of pump, pump, hitting the steel. And I'm there, and the boat goes that way. I hit this wall, and I boat goes this way, and that keeps me from falling out. The legs go that way, and then my head hits that way. And they were out of penicillin. And all they could give me was sulfa. So 4 tablets every 4 hours. So luckily, after the first night, the fever broke. So I finally, instead of getting on a board, getting discharged right away, they sent me to the hospital in Camp Dix. Mm-hmm. But the seas were so rough, and this ship has 2 boilers. Sure enough, one of the boilers didn't work. So it was making 15 miles an hour. That's if you say, figure miles. So all it was doing was 15 miles. It took us 2 weeks to travel from Italy to New York State, to New York. But as we're going to New York, I told the doctor, I says, I want to go and see the Statue of Liberty. He says, you better stay in bed. Sure enough, when we were passing the Statue of Liberty, I was by the railing looking at it, and he's just laughing. And so then they sent me there, and I had all these pictures in my 2 barracks bags, and being at that time staff sergeant. And after 2 days, I'm bitching to the doctor that I want to go home because there was a couple more days to pass, and it would be my anniversary, wedding anniversary. And so they finally discharged me. But why I kept these pictures is because when my barracks bags, they took them down to the supply. By dumb luck, mine were on the bottom, and all the rest of them were on top. And some of the stateside men were stealing. They were stealing in those things because they were looking for 45s and all that. Mm-hmm. In other words, and mine happened to be on the bottom. So that's the reason I have those pictures. Otherwise, they would have stole those. And
Matt, we're coming down to the last few minutes of the tape here. So I want to catch a couple of things. And you came back, and you in 1948, you entered the Air Force Reserves?
Yes, after I saw that I couldn't, I didn't want to go back to my waiter's job. I had it up to here. Mm-hmm. To me, there was only 2 Polish waiters in the hotel at that time. Polish people are not very good servants.
And then after that, you were in the 107th Fighter Wing?
I transferred into the 107 because that Gallon reserves were too much saluting. And all they had was a meeting like at the post office. And they again put us in the Naval Reserve there for the first couple months. And then they built one, what do you call it? We went to one of the hangars from Bell Aircraft.
And you had children?
Yes, then Dennis was the first child, and then I had a girl. And then we hung up the glasses because I got glass because I was 35 when I got in the service, 31 when I got in the service. So that was enough for us. And the reason I stayed with my brother-in-laws because they needed help. They were started a business and they were selling yeast to bakeries. 2 pounds here, 10 pounds there, and so on. And then the bakeries asked them for seeds and stuff. And they started selling more and more supplies until they were quite a larger unit. And they asked me to help, you know, I'd fix their truck, and then I'd start delivering for them. And first thing you know, the children come. And my brother-in-law decided to build his house down the street. So we built his house for him. And I took his lot that was over a garage that he built for his mother there. And he, after 3 years, he owed me. I bought this lot, see? And he owed me, in other words, 3 years after that, I said, now you owe me. I'm building a house.
Matt, we've got about a minute or two left. Thinking back all those years to your experiences in World War II, does anything stand out more than anything else? Is there anything that kind of sums up the whole experience for you?
Well, the bombings, that trip to Naples, Cernola is an airport across the bay. And I again landed there, and I told him what I was going to do in there, and I said, I'm there to take pictures of the bombings. This is on my own, and it wasn't official. And he said, no, you better stay here. You'll be able to see all the action from here. But that was too far, see, so I went across, and I got a hotel room, and they got the balconies there. So I set the camera on there, and I waited 2 nights for the Jerry's to come, and they never did come. So I let it go. See, there's another case of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But I think that's what really, out of the whole military thing, not the war, but the whole military thing, the greatest thrill for me was, besides going to Alaska, this year was discharging that unit that night, that day. To me, that was my greatest thrill.
Oh, at your retirement. I'll tell you what, we're going to stop here.